What is going on, people? Alex Schlinsky here for the Get More Clients Show, episode number 3. So excited to be here with you. Thank you so much, as always, for giving us your time. As always, I am here with my co-host, Brian Downard. Today, we will be talking about the mindset shifts every agency owner, coach, consultant, business owner, entrepreneur needs, that's you, by the way, needs to go through to break through your mental glass ceiling and limiting beliefs, breaking that narrative that you're telling yourself that you're not good enough, not capable enough, that other people are better, that you're not moving fast enough, all that mental garbage that we know that you're dealing with. We're going to share with you how we've overcome those exact feelings before and hopefully allow you to expand your greatness, grow your impact, and really create the business that facilitates your life and not the other way around. Brian, tell them where they can find us and watch the other clips if they have not.
Of course. So we're going to be streaming this full episode live every week in our Facebook group, but you can also check out the clips of the episodes, all the top moments. Those should be starting to come out this week. You'll see that, as well as full episodes over on YouTube, as well as soon to be on the Spotify. I keep wanting to say Shopify, but it's Spotify,
Not Shopify.
And Apple Podcasts. Not on Shopify. Maybe we'll have like mugs and stuff later down the road. But for
Merch.
now,
We're already talking merch episode 3. I love it.
Yeah. So if you want to subscribe, you like what you hear, leave us a review and help us reach more people, because we are going to share a lot of really valuable content in this episode. Like Alex said, a lot of the things that we share with our clients on a pretty regular basis to help them overcome just the challenges of becoming an entrepreneur and really dealing with the challenges you asked for when you said, I want to be an entrepreneur. So let's talk about it. I'm going to just lead us off with the first concept, and that is that you're playing an infinite game. Now, what does that mean? An infinite game means that business in general never, ever ends. It's just an ongoing system that never stops. And because of that, it can become very cynical, and you feel like you're on this continuous hamster wheel of trying to achieve, get to the next level, just go, 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 and never really truly figuring out what you want the business to do for you. Now, I'm going to let Alex talk about this here in just a moment, but I want to share 2 quick stories that really resonated with me around this specific lesson. First one being, when I was younger in my agency, we worked with a lot of patio furniture stores. And one of our best clients had a record-breaking year. They went from, I think, $4 to $5 million. And it was a big deal for them to make that jump. But on the year-end meeting review, we basically acknowledged that in a minute or 2. And then the rest of the conversation was, okay, how do we keep making more money? How do we get to 6, 7, 8 million? And to me, as a young entrepreneur who's hearing that kind of money and thinking that is insane, if I could even get a fraction of that, I would be so happy. It was really sobering to hear the conversation around, well, we're just going to keep going. We got to figure it out. Go, go, go. Don't stop. So to me, that was the first lesson and kind of red flag that there's not an end to this, is there? And the second story actually comes from Steve Jobs' biography, where on his deathbed, he was working on, I believe it was like the iPhone 7 or iPhone 8. We're all the way on to like iPhone 12 Pro Maxes now, maybe 13, 14 by the time you're listening to this episode. But it's really a sad story of spending his last minutes on Earth doing something that's already obsolete, essentially, and that has grown beyond him. Now, if unlike probably the most people listening to this, you're not going to be Steve Jobs. That's okay. But you want to build a business that can set you up for the lifestyle you want to live, can sure become a legacy and outlive you. But personally, I don't want to spend my last weeks, months, years on Earth in my business. I want to be enjoying myself, enjoying my time with family and friends, and doing the things I want to do. Now, if you want to be in the business, that's a different story entirely, but just acknowledge you're playing an infinite game. You don't need to accomplish it all right now. And even when you do get to those milestones and accomplishments you have in your mind right now, that if I just get there, I'll be so happy, I promise you, you'll be challenging yourself to go deeper and go further. So find ways to actually enjoy the process. So Alex, I'm going to kick this over to you, and I want you to share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think this infinite games thing is something really, frankly, you taught me because I used to work a lot from the back foot, kind of like from this place of stress and anxiety, regardless of how much money I made. And I thought it would change based on the amount of money I made. And this is when I realized it didn't. When I was making, $500 a month writing for MMA Mania, SB Nation, and being a Miami Dolphins media member, I did something I really like. I was working in sports, but I wasn't making enough money. And my agency was still kind of fledgling. And then I was thinking, babe, could you just imagine if I was making making $10,000, and for clarity, I wasn't calling Brian Babe. That was my wife that I was calling Babe. I mean, Brian could be called Babe if we want to do that, but that wasn't the case. But I was essentially saying, like, could you imagine if we were making $10,000 a month? And then when we hit 10,000, could you imagine hitting 25? And then we hit 25, could you imagine 35? And then it was 35, could you imagine 50? And when it was 50, could you imagine 100? And every single time we hit the milestone, it was never enough, right? Because I think there's this fear of this word contentment, that if you're kind of stagnant or content or even happy in many ways, you're failing as an entrepreneur because you're not pushing yourself more. You're not hustling harder. This hustle movement that I think is kind of like cancerous to so many people, especially people that are type A personalities, like pretty aggressive, highly emotional. This guy right here, 2 thumbs, Alex Linsky, that's me. It's something that really pushes people to the brink of burnout and stress and frustration and never having something that they're happy about. And really what Brian was talking about with this infinite game is he constantly brings up, like, these are the problems you asked for. This is your business, not your job. It's weird how many people come to us and they're like, I hate doing prospecting, or I hate doing project management, or I hate doing this. And conventional wisdom says the CEO can't do these things and yada, yada. It's like, this is your business. It's not your job. It's not some boss out there telling you what to do. You're the one that decides what you do with your time, not conventional wisdom from a book you read or some podcast you listen to. It's just what you want to do with your time, your most valuable asset. How you utilize it is key. I still do sales calls in many ways for the coaching program we run, Prospecting on Demand. And some people ask me, like, why does a CEO do that? And the reason why is because I like doing that. I want to do that. It's a choice. It's not out of necessity. And that's the idea of building the business you want. Facilitating your life through your business is so key. Instead of living to work, working to live, or excuse me, the opposite, right? You don't want to just live to work. You want to work to live, build a business that really matters to you and helps facilitate your version of success. And we talk about success a lot, and I just want to bring this to the table before we talk a little bit about your passions and how you actually build this business out with your appreciated mindset of what really matters and what really works. This idea of success, a lot of people use some other person's definition. Like, they'll use Tony Robbins' definition of, like, I want to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, however I want, as long as I want. And that's a great definition. Or other people identify, I want to make 10K a month, or I want to help 100 people achieve X result. And those things are all fine. But if you're not defining your own success, if you're following someone else's path or model, it's never going to mean enough to you. And it's always going to create this anxiety and stress of not having that fulfillment. And to me, success is fulfillment, is feeling like I've done something that actually matters. And the more we can define things, the better, because a lot of people utilize singular terms without definition, like success, happiness, fear, fulfillment, scarcity, abundance, freedom. Like, what do those things mean to you specifically? One of the rules that we have in our coaching program is identifying when you hit a milestone, right? When you hit a milestone, what's the reward that you're going to give yourself for hitting that milestone? And a lot of people, Brian, they joke with us. They're like, I don't know. I don't care. It's like, if you don't care, then what are you working for? Like, just for the sake of it? Just the sake of it? The only way to achieve these goals and move forward efficiently is by taking action, but having clarity instead of overwhelm on what that goal is and what that race is. So I'll explain this before we finish this off here in this little model. It's running your race. It's not focusing on what other people are doing. It's focusing on you. Sticking with the essentialism and stoicism mindset of what you have control over, what you can focus on, your actions, not your outcomes. And this is my favorite metaphor I bring to the table all the time. It's whose race is it? Who's going to win this race? Mo Farah, legendary long distance meter runner from Britain, or Usain Bolt, the legendary short meter distance runner from Jamaica. Who's winning in that race? And a lot of people are like, well, it depends on how long the race is. It also depends if this guy breaks his leg. It depends where it is, what the wind trajectory is. None of those things matter. It's only that first element. How long the race is dependent on who's going to win. You have to run your race, no one else's race. That's the key, not focusing on what other people are doing. There's 3 things that we advise people to consider when they're running their race or building out their finish line, their goal, their Oz, so that they can build a yellow brick road to it. And these 3 things are as follows. What specific achievements will make you happy? What specific achievements will make you fulfilled? And what things will make you dissatisfied? If you can focus on these 3 things specifically from this podcast, this live, this whatever video that you're watching, it will help you deliver yourself in a position of feeling better about what you do as an entrepreneur. And I think that's the key. overall, long-term sustainability of happiness and fulfillment, and lack of dissatisfaction.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm going to add to this a little bit before I hop on to the next piece. And it's that idea of, like you were saying, when you get to a certain milestone, wanting to get to the next thing, and then constantly comparing yourself to everyone who is ahead of you. I can remember 3, 4, 5 years ago when I saw people who were in the place that we're in now with our business, I envied that. And I was like, wow, if I could only be there. And I got to this point, now I'm looking ahead, man, if I could only be there. So there's this weird, double-edged sword to content and social media where I want to provide value, we want to provide value, put out videos, content, clips like this. But at the same time, I sort of feel this pressure to do it and be a certain way while also looking at what other people are doing because I'm being not manipulated, but my brain is being clogged or like my creativity is being clogged by what I see other people doing, thinking that that's what I need to do as well to be happy instead of asking myself, what do I actually want? So love that. Great lessons to learn. Let's move on to the next mental lesson. This is going to be more for you beginner entrepreneurs, people who are just getting into starting your business, maybe even a couple months, a year into your journey. But it's this idea of protecting your passion. A really good friend of ours and a colleague, actually, Sean McCabe, taught me this in his book. And it's the idea that if you go all in on your business too soon before it's in a place where it can comfortably pay you and you can live from that, you're putting yourself in a very precarious spot because if it doesn't work out exactly how you want it to, like all plans in life, we make plans and the universe laughs at us, but you risk having to sacrifice that because you give up entirely on the business when you're like, well, that didn't work out, so now I have to give it up and go back to my job or go live with my parents or whatever that is, versus the alternative is having other things in place. So if you're younger, maybe that means you got a couple part-time jobs or you're going to school. Maybe if you're older and you already have a 9 to 5, don't leave that until the business is in a place where you comfortably are paying yourself that income. And frankly, even when your business gets to a place where it can replace your income, I wouldn't do that right away because things can happen. There could be a worldwide pandemic. You could lose all of your clients overnight for no reason. Like, obviously not no reason. That would be pretty crazy. But the point is there's so much out of your control in the business that if you aren't giving it the runway it needs to really take off, it's going to crash before it ever even gets off the ground. And you will be frustrated because you just sacrificed your passion, the thing you wanted, because you jumped in too soon. So again, just a little page out of my story and my history. When I was starting my original agency making iPhone apps, I was also in college, I was delivering pizzas, and I was a tour guide, and we weren't really making enough money yet, but I pivoted the business to be more websites, lead gen, and really started to niche down. Okay, now I'm starting to be able to replace my income. Now, I was in a place, obviously, where I didn't need that much income. I was young and didn't need much to live on. If you're in a place where you've got a family and a lot of people to support and take care of, this advice is even more true. Don't put all of that at jeopardy. Give yourself the time necessary to get the business off the ground, and don't go back. Don't try and go all in too soon, or you might have to go back to what you didn't want to be doing in the first place. So I'm going to kick this over to Alex now, talk about the next lesson. This is more around the idea of fear. So Alex, I'm just going to go ahead and let you take it away.
Yeah, I love that. And everything Brian is saying here is so valuable about the intentions and how you protect your passions and focusing on things that you're good at and kind of risk aversion in many ways. And that's something that I think is a good segue into this idea of fear and how people utilize fear in their business, both as motivation, but mostly as a detriment to being able to move forward in any positive way. A lot of people that we work with and a lot of people that we see, whether you're brand new to entrepreneurship or you're a veteran in the game, and a veteran could be someone that's been doing this for 3 years or someone that's been doing it for 20, it's irrelevant. A lot of people build off of this fear, this idea of, I don't want to take this step or do this thing or reach out to this person out of fear. And I think if people were to understand, like we brought up earlier in the podcast, this idea of not letting a single word define so many emotions and have such a strict definition and a rigid policy, you kind of break it down a lot more logically than emotionally. You can feel more comfortable with how you can make progress on things that you're afraid to make progress on. The fear audit ultimately is this subconscious fear of not delivering, so you end up sabotaging the sale, or a fear that you are not good enough for a client and thus not willing to sell, or a fear that you shouldn't reach out to a friend of yours because he'll look at you strangely, right? This is like the classic MLM fear that people have, or the fear of, other people being better than you, like we spoke about with competition analysis earlier. The thing that I recommend people do is a fear audit, which is just consistently asking yourself, what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen? I'll give you a perfect example. Someone we're working with came to me last week and said, I'm really afraid of doing warm calls. Now, just to explain that really quick, we don't recommend doing cold calls, which is literally just picking up the phone saying, hey, I do this business, I want to offer you this thing. We do a model called the warm call process, which is you send a message to them, you connect with them in some way, then call them to utilize that digital connection and making it more personal by then asking them if they want something and are willing to get on a call with you. And we do this whole process like with the Hot Wing Hotline and the Cold Call Shot Line. You guys can check that out later in our groups. But for now, I want to talk about the fear audit specifically. So this client specifically mentioned to me that they were worried and fearful of doing this call process. And I asked them if they were willing to jump on a quick call with me so we can flesh it out. And we did a fear audit. And this fear audit was basically breaking down each element in the worst case scenario, and I'll frame it for you right now. So I said, if you call, what's the biggest fear that you have? The biggest fear that I have is that someone will be upset at me for calling them and wasting their time and they'll hang up. And then if you say, okay, so now that we understand that fear, what happens if they hang up on you? Well, if they hang up on me, then I'm gonna feel dejected and feel crappy about it, and that's that. I'm like, okay, and once you feel dejected and crappy about it, what's the next thing that's going to happen? I'll either stop doing the calls or I'll pick up the phone and doing the next one. Okay, and if you stop doing the calls, what's going to happen? If I stop doing the calls, I won't be able to create any new revenue or new opportunities. Okay, and if you won't create any, and then you just keep going down and keep going down, all the way until a position of realizing at some point this fear is no longer founded. It's only emotional, it's not logical. And the result that we came to with this person was, your fear is an emotional reaction of someone telling you F you, or I'm not interested, or why are you wasting your time, when the reality comes down to, who cares what they think? It's going to be a 20-second conversation. You're never going to speak to them again. Your ego is not going to be bruised that badly, and you'll be fine. And the thing with fear audits is that you can do this with anything in your business. Fearful of sales, fearful of not delivering for clients, fearful of time management, fearful of not providing for your team, fearful of your team not providing for you. All of these elements, when you really break them down logically instead of emotionally, at some point you'll realize, I have to pick up the sticks and do it again, right? And that's okay. And that's all right. And the easiest way to also utilize this fear audit is through what I call a perspective audit. So if you didn't know, by the time that we're recording this this video, I am 14 weeks post open heart surgery. I'm only 29 years old. So to have open heart surgery at this time when my wife is about to have our first kid is pretty scary, right? And obviously that fear is a lot less emotionally triggered than it is like an actual real logical fear of potentially, passing away, unfortunately. And here I am, I'm all good. But the thing that really helped me before the surgery is having a perspective audit. And the perspective audit, and something that you can consider, which with a lot less stakes, obviously, in your business, as opposed to an open heart surgery, is identifying what thing in your life earlier were you so concerned about, so worried about, that really caused a lot of anxiety, distrust with yourself, concern, fear, etc., that you can go back to and look upon to think, well, that thing was so scary at the time, but now, in retrospect, it was no big deal. A great example for me is back when I was in school, I used to be so worried about getting the best grades possible. I actually graduated magna cum laude from the University of Central Florida, and guess who only cares about that? My mom. No one else gives a crap about that. No business model has ever cared about it. No client has ever cared about it. But at the time, I put so much energy and effort into being stressed out about every test, every exam, every requirement, everything, that when I look back upon it 10 years later, I wonder, why did I give so much negative energy to that? And that allows me to focus on the things that I'm putting too much negative energy into now. These are the perspective audits that are needed. And I even use that before surgery to say, so many people have gone through this. They've all been fine. I'm giving myself too much negative energy, just like I did elsewhere in my life that ended up being completely fine. I'm going to be completely fine. Let's move forward. And this model works out really well. Now, this is a really good fit for how to get outside your comfort zone, which is something that we were just talking about with this previous client being afraid of warm calling. So Brian, why don't you talk a little bit about the comfort zone and how scary it is to get out of it?
Yeah, and I definitely gonna need to try one of those Magnum lattes when I'm in Florida. Like
Yes.
that sounds great. I'm just kidding. I never heard that word until I met you, so I guess people don't care that much, but it's still impressive. So hats off to you, good sir. All right, now Alex talked a lot about fear already here. I'm only going to spend a moment here, but the idea of getting outside your comfort zone is a really, I guess it's almost cliche at this point, but the idea of everything you want being on the other side of fear, being outside of your comfort zone. And a lot of times we have clients tell us they want a certain thing, but they're not willing to go put in the actions needed to get there. And it doesn't add up, right? You can't have one without the other. I love the analogy Alex always uses of going to the gym, wanting to get a six-pack and paying a personal trainer, doing all the stuff, but just showing up day one and saying, okay, do it. It's like, no, you have to put in the work. If you want the outcome, you have to earn it. And one of the best examples of this, like he was saying, is warm calling, because it's scary, the fear of possibly being rejected. But I promise you, at the earlier stages of your business, and even if you have a great business already, but you're like, hey, I really want to focus in and get opportunities, the quicker you can move to shorten your sales cycle, so to not wait for someone to get back to you, but to instead pick up the phone, go directly to them and get a yes or no. Sure, it's scary, but it's going to significantly accelerate your results and ability to scale. So I want you just to acknowledge that it's okay to have that fear and to feel like this is outside of your comfort zone, but acknowledge that as part of the process to growth and step into that fear, step into that unknown. I promise you, you will grow as a human personally, professionally, by doing these things that are uncomfortable. And if I could add one more thing here, it would be, this is actually funny, I got this idea from Joe Rogan, and it makes sense because it's already something I had been doing, but do something really difficult every single day. Your brain is training you, your lizard brain, to stay comfortable and protect you. But if you can do something uncomfortable every day outside that comfort zone, it's going to push you mentally and allow you to realize, hey, I can do this in other areas of my life as well. The most tangible example I have for my life would be CrossFit. CrossFit is not an easy, I'll call it a sport or activity, but you go do that and there's nothing else I'm going to do in a day that is typically harder than that. And it allows me to train my brain to step into that fear and the uncomfort for sure. So again, Alex likes to say this as well, but life's greatest treasures are on the other side of that fear. There's a lot of different ways to say that, and everything you want's on the other side of your comfort zone. It's all just different ways of saying the same thing. If you want these things in life, you need to move closer to them by doing things you're not comfortable with. Now,
Amen.
Let's talk a little bit. I'm going to share a couple more ideas with you and just concepts you should be using. And that is the idea of the freelancer's trap. Okay, this is a very interesting one. So we're going to kind of move away from esoteric mindset stuff and talk more about practical operational pieces in your business. We'll probably go back and forward a little bit. But the idea of the freelancer's trap is trying to have to do everything in your business. And I think a lot of coaches, mentors, and courses out there tee entrepreneurs up for failure, unfortunately. Now, I don't want to throw names under the bus because I
do it.
No names. Just to say what the programs were about. If you've ever taken a program on how to do Facebook ads, you were probably duped. Unless you really wanted to go really do Facebook ads, you don't need to do that as an entrepreneur or agency owner. The best thing to start with is finding the audience you want to serve and then building the pieces around you to best support them. I was a victim of this as well. I tried to learn how to make iPhone apps. I thought I needed to be the one how to make iPhone apps versus partnering with a developer to help make something that we could use and build for us. Same thing goes in your agency. If you're trying to learn how to do Facebook ads and you're struggling and not really getting it, it's very, very difficult to go from beginner to, oh crap, I've really got this figured out, now I can make this work. That is going to extend significantly the runway we talked about earlier when you're trying to protect your passion if you're trying to learn how to do everything yourself. And now, let's say you do know how to do it yourself, right? Maybe you're the best Facebook advertiser in the nation, but you will be stuck a freelancer if you are the one doing all the work. You've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 clients. Holy crap, now you've just created a bunch of mini bosses. There needs to be this point in your business at which you let go of control, you surround yourself with people who can truly support, and that is how you will grow outside of just becoming a freelancer and actually start building a real business. Now, the really easy way to sort of compartmentalize this would be to focus on your strengths and delegate your weaknesses, okay? Just want you guys to take that one to the bank. Very, very important. Now, what I also want to say here around the idea of being a freelancer, doing the offer, testing things out, and again, not trying to have to do everything, but is this idea of failing forward and being okay with your offer being imperfect. We're going to talk a lot about offers in episode 4, I believe, where we're going to go a little bit deeper on sales and what your offer should and how it should be framed. But the idea is, chances are you're not going to get the perfect result for all of your clients. Even if you have a campaign that is crushing it, sometimes just a different person in a different place will have drastically different results for the campaign. You don't always control that, but you need to be willing to take this imperfect action, move towards a place where you can fail forward and learn from the mistake of, okay, so this didn't work out for the client. How can I go back to the drawing boards and improve that? Do we need to change our strategy? Do we need to change who's executing it? Do we need another team member? Do we need someone else? Do we not need the team member who's currently working on it? But if you are too afraid to start to sell your offer because fear of delivering it, that is a very dangerous game to play because you're going to sabotage yourself on these sales calls. So I'm going to let Alex actually talk about this for a little bit in the idea of selling before you are certain in your offer.
100%. I think there's definitely like a line in discussion here that we could do an entire podcast around, like the integrity needed to sell and your confidence needed to sell. One of the things that I like to bring up here is like the idea of feeling okay that your best is good enough for someone, and not leveraging like false expectation setting in order to sell, but really telling someone like, my best effort is good enough for you to be successful. And we'll talk about actions over outcomes in just a second. There's two quick things I want to bring up here, and that's Kinsugi. Most people listening to me try to say a Japanese word will either laugh at me or say, I've heard of that before, but I guess most people haven't heard this philosophy before. And it's an incredible idea from the Japanese that I think is really, really valuable to consider. The philosophy is essentially that something that's broken or something that was repaired is more valuable. It's part of the history of that person, that object, that thing, as opposed to something that you want to disguise or pretend that never happened. And I think a lot of people in the industry, they want to kind of gloss over any failures or mistakes and only focus on things that were positive and wins and opportunities that worked out, not things that they failed at or made mistakes on. And I think there's really a lot of value. So in theory, what Kinsugi actually is when broken pottery happens, instead of throwing it away, they'll repurpose it by putting not just glue on it, but like golden or silver dust on it to make it actually more valuable than what it was. And the value to me is something that I think about, like our cracks as human beings, our cracks as entrepreneurs, our failures and mistakes that we've made as people and as entrepreneurs make us better than the alternative. They make us better than the things that we believe make us worse. Like it's not just the perfection that people are looking for, it's actually the cracks that make us better, and that's called Kinsugi. And I think it's really valuable. And the other end of that spectrum is also the idea of actions over outcomes. I'll tell you a very quick story on this as I plug in my computer charger so it doesn't die, which would suck on this recording because tech stuff's actually working. So really quick on actions over outcomes. You might have potentially noticed that I'm a lot shorter than Brian. So when he's talking about CrossFit and doing handstand push-ups, which he can do an entire podcast on by himself, it's probably not really my skill. Doing like athletic feats, not really my skill. But still, when I was younger, I played in Little League baseball. And I was the closer for one of our teams on baseball. Closer is the last person that pitches, essentially, if you're brand new to baseball. So I remember being on this stage, this opportunity. I might have been 10, maybe 11 years old, and we lost the game. And I remember going home after the game and crying and being really upset. And my dad came into my room, who was at the game, and he's like, why are you upset? And then I started angry crying. You guys all know that. Like, yeah, I'm so upset because you know why I hurt her. Right? And he was saying, okay, well, what'd you expect to happen? And I said, well, of course, I expected to win. And then my dad said something that really created a paradigm shift for me and changed the way that I think about everything moving forward from my life at that moment. And he said, what do you think the batter thought? My life at that point had been everything revolves around me, even though I'm sure all of you have heard like the world doesn't revolve around you. That was kind of like a big thing my parents would say, but I still believed that that was the case at that time in my life. And when my dad asked me what the batter had thought, I wasn't considering that obviously the batter went up to bat and thinking, I'm going to win this game, not I'm going to lose, right? So in that scenario, we both had the same outcome that we wanted, to win. In that scenario, my outcome didn't happen, I lost. And in that scenario, his outcome happened and he won. And then he asked me, my dad said, okay, so in this scenario, now that you understand, both of you had the same goal, the same outcome, right? Only one of you could have had that outcome appropriately. Did you give it your best? And I said, of course, I always give it my best. And he said, then you have nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that's such a valuable and important life lesson for business owners and entrepreneurs. Your best is good enough because you can't give more than your best. That's just the reality here. I think so many people watching this podcast or being an entrepreneur, running an agency, no matter how long you've done it, you always want to do more than your best, which is physically impossible. It's an excitable idea of being able to do better than what you've done prior, but you can literally only physically give it your best. And that's something that Brian and I are always striving for, giving it our best, not being perfect, but giving it our best. And I think those two values are really valuable. The idea that your failures make you better than being perfect, and the idea of focusing on actions, not the outcomes, because the only action that matters most is giving it your actual best. And I think truly that that's the most valuable thing. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Brian, before we move on to our favorite topic of client success and acquisition?
No, it's just something we need to remind ourselves of, you and me and everyone in general, that if you truly believe it, and don't lie to yourself, because you know if you can be doing more, you can. But there's a line, right, of making sure you are doing as much as you can without sacrificing other important areas of your life, your family, your friends, spending time with loved ones. But just remind yourself you're doing the best you can. And I think that's a powerful reminder, because there's peace of mind in that at the end of the day, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you're never going to be able to get all things done in a single day. I envy sometimes other people in different professions that have a 24-hour basically on, like the business is on 24/7. My wife, who's a veterinarian, got a couple friends who are police officers, but at the end of their shift, they can leave and have peace of mind that the next person is going to help them. In our business, in your business too, there's always going to be something else for you to do, and it feels like, if I'm not doing it all in a day, that you're a failure. Just remind yourself you're doing the best you can, truly do the best you can, and then the outcomes will fall where they may. But typically, if you're putting in the right actions, you will get the outcomes you want from that.
I think talking about actions now is a perfect segue into this final piece. And this is kind of something that Brian and I and the POD team as a whole have kind of staked our claim for. And we really believe in this. And that's the idea of focusing more so on client success than client acquisition. I'll first start this off with this idea that I think it's very interesting that everyone we've worked with believes that they have this novel idea that they care more about their clients than anyone else does. And I think it's a good thing to believe, but actually everyone we've worked with really does care about the people that they work with, so much so that they sabotage themselves, like we've spoken about prior, because they don't have X result. They don't feel comfortable in selling that result. And again, there's a line for integrity and all that, and we're not here to discuss that specifically today. But it's interesting how so many people that we work with in the entrepreneur space, agency or coaching models, are saying, I can't sell this because I don't have this result, or I don't feel comfortable because I can't get this result for my client, or I don't know if I can help my client. And I think a lot of people really resonate with this idea of focusing more on client success than client acquisition. And our model and our kind of belief in this is making sure that we do whatever it takes to really listen to our clients in their satisfaction level and providing them the result that they want. And me, before I was working with Brian, my big concern was that people were not doing what I had asked or not following the line of what I was putting together in our programs. And Brian would say, alongside John Davies, shout out to him, like the idea is not that they get what we want them to get out of the program, but they get what they want out of the program. And that allowed us to change our entire coaching philosophy altogether, whether that it's not that we're going to be someone that tells them what to do, right? We're not going to define success for them. We're not going to define what they have to do. They're going to tell us what life they want to live, what business they want to build, and then we'll help them build a business that facilitates that life. And that is truly caring more about client success than client acquisition. And that's not disregarding acquisition. That's not saying getting new clients isn't valuable. It is. It just means that supporting the current clients and getting them what they want, not what you think they want. That's the key. is really, really valuable and super important to us. So if you're listening to this and really need and want mentorship and help and support for people that care about what you want, not what we tell you you need or not what conventional wisdom tells you need, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to help you and support you. We think that's such an important and valuable characteristic of coaching and mentorship, and we want more people out there to have it. And hopefully you do. As you listen to this, you resonate and think, I do really care about how my clients succeed, and I really want that to be the win. I tell my people in sales coaching, which we'll talk about in our next show, like the victory is not getting paid right now, it's getting you the results. And when you say that and you mean it, that makes your sales process so much more valuable. And speaking of sales, let's talk about how we can make sales a little bit easier. Because I think Occam's razor, the idea of like making things easier, the simpler is the answer, essentialism, focusing on only the things that matter, is really valuable, except most people struggle with Superman syndrome, where they're like, I'm going to carry everything. I'm going to wear every hat. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to serve everyone. And then you build out this insane Frankenstein business. And a lot of the people that we've been working with recently, I know Brian definitely agrees with me on this, come to us with this Frankenstein agency model. It's like, I offer every service under the sun. I have clients in 17 different niches. I have 3 team members that have no roles. And I work from 8 o'clock till 8 p.m. at night every single day. And I hate myself and I hate my life. That's my business model. And they're like, I am Frankenstein. But really, they're just trying to be Superman or Superwoman in this case, trying to like really juggle every single thing in the business instead of just embracing the power of one. And this sounds like such a cheesy like 90s comic idea, like embrace the power of one. But you should, like you legit should embrace the power of one. One offer, one audience, one process. Focus on one thing at a time, vertically scale that to the level you want, then horizontally scale to the next one thing at a time. Otherwise, if you try to do all these things, you'll make minimal progress in 40 different directions instead of massive momentous progress in one direction. Stop trying to carry the load by yourself. Stop trying to do it all. Please make sure you can focus on the right things, the things that are most essential, the things that facilitate the life that you want to live. Again, making you happy, fulfilled, things that will avoid dissatisfaction. Those elements are key. Focusing and embracing on the power of one is so important. So Brian, you have a favorite saying of yours. I'm not going to spoil it. I'll let you kind of take it over. But how do you embrace the power of one? Not focus on client success, you want to actually focus on client success, not just client acquisition. And you want to make sure you're not doing it all, but still not doing too much for each individual person. How do you handle that?
Yeah, thank you. That was great. That was a great tee-up. It's almost like we planned it. So my favorite saying, and I wish I had the book somewhere, but I actually gave it away as a Christmas present to one of our friends' kids, because this is from a kid's book.
How dare
you? I'll buy it again when But the title of the book, and there's different versions of this, but is what happens when you give a moose a muffin? Or I think it's if you give a moose a muffin, right? There's different versions of this. I think there's if you give a mouse a cookie. There's modern ones, like if you give a turtle an iPhone. Like there's this goofy kid story. But the real lesson here, and this is sort of on the flip side of the idea of caring about client success and retention. Not that you don't care about it, but let me break down just what this means first, and I'll talk about that. So the idea of don't give a moose a muffin is if you give a moose a muffin, he's going to want to ask for butter. Then he's going to want jam. Then he's going to want to come inside. Then he's going to want to watch a movie. Then he's going to want to do some art, and he's going to make a mess. And then before you know it, you have a moose sleeping on your sofa and living in your home. Clients can be very, very similar. Hopefully you never had an example where a client's trying to come actually live with you. I'm sure that's happened. But if you get, and this is also a classic saying, is if you give someone an inch, they will take a mile. So it's very important to, of course, care about the success and results of your clients, but in respect to your time, drawing appropriate lines in the sand that not only keep them at arm's length, but allow them to not abuse your time. Because it's very easy for a client to all of a sudden start calling you, emailing you, texting you on your nights and your weekends. And here's a crazy story. This just happened on Friday. Fortunately, I have a personal relationship with this person, so it's not that big of a deal. But one of my ex-clients, who I did a little bit of consulting for, called me at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. And my first thought is, hell no. But I had set that expectation years ago where I would just, I'd pick up the phone. That's all good. And that was my bad because I was giving a moose a muffin, where now all of a sudden they're expecting they can take my time and talk all about all these things on a weekend where I'm like, I didn't want that. That's not why I built the business. So the easiest thing, I'll give you a real tangible piece of advice you can walk away from this with, is use what's called a service level agreement. This is basically a document that clearly lays out how communication will work, where they can communicate with you, how long communication will take. So is it 24 business hours you'll respond? Is it 2 days, 3 days? Is it within an hour? What is the time frame? Where can they communicate? And so important, where can they not communicate with you? It needs to be clear. Look, if you need support, you can email us here. We'll get back to you in 24 hours. We have predefined bi-weekly or bi-monthly calls, and you cannot call me on my cell phone after hours. You cannot text me. You cannot DM me on Facebook and draw that line, or else when you give a moose a muffin, they'll be living in your house. So care about client success, but do yourself a favor. And this is frankly how you can support even more people and make a bigger impact, is not be in the freelancer trap of doing everything, spending all your time with just a few clients. Allow yourself to help more people by setting the boundary, surrounding yourself with a team who you trust, who can support those clients. So very, very important. And Alex loves to say this one as well, but I'm just going to steal it from him. He likes to say, don't mistake my kindness for weakness, right? So just because we're going to take a phone call with you doesn't mean you can abuse or go above and beyond for you, doesn't mean you can abuse that long term and expect that to be the not just the rule, but the exception, right?
Exactly.
So,
I love it. I want to add one other thing to what
Go
you're
ahead.
saying here that I think is great. And this is the idea of like, when you lay down, like Brian is talking about, these rules, these responsibilities, these expectation settings, so you don't give the moose a muffin and then he owns your house, like Brian's talking about. He said sleep on your sofa. You can keep going deeper, just similar to the fear audit, where you just don't end. And at some point they own your house and they're your landlord somehow. The idea of like not mistaking kindness for weakness is similar to the idea of addition by subtraction. And I think sometimes you have moose clients, people that take so much of your energy, people that take so much of your time. And instead of focusing on what you could be doing with that time, the opportunity cost of that time, you're like, I can't lose this client. I need this business. We call them PITA clients, pain in the ass clients, right? And hopefully you're not dealing with them, but I think anyone that's ever had any business has experienced a PITA client before. And then when you lose that client, either because they finally just gave up or you finally gave up, you realize it's addition by subtraction. And that seems to be such a harsh way to say, like, oh, you gave up on someone and they sucked. It's all their fault. We're not placing blame on anyone. That's not what we're suggesting or telling you to do. It's more so feeling comfortable that you understand what you're spending your time on. And if that time is not worth the investment that they're providing to you, both financially, but also emotionally, because I think that's really important. And part of the Moose and Muffin strategy is how much they're taking from you emotionally as well as time-wise, I think is really key. Don't want to take away from anyone that's a good client, but you do want to take away from the people that aren't good, either team members, clients, etc. And this idea of addition by subtraction is so valuable. It's so ironic that people who end up paying the least expect the most in terms of the return. And that's why if you remove them from the equation altogether, you might lose a client, lose some revenue, but overall you'll free up your time, free up your happiness, create more opportunities for yourself, and go from there. The last thing we wanted to talk about is kind of this 30-day rule that we have. And we think it's a really good end to finish this podcast on a positive note about opportunities that you can create long-term. Because I think a lot of people want things the now style, which is really hard to do in the world that we live in, because everything is so quick, everything is so fast. At some point, I'm sure you'll be able to make an instant pizza like in the Back to the Future, but even waiting 10 minutes for them to deliver it is like horrible. But how could you possibly wait that long? Brian, how do you have people feel more comfortable about acquisition or prospecting or opportunities when they have to wait? What's the rule that we go through?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this earlier, and it's paying the dues, earning the right through getting outside your comfort zone to achieve these things. A little more esoteric. Let's get really specific and, I guess, tangible or tactical with this, if you will. Now, in prospecting, so that is doing lead generation, creating opportunities for your business, there's a rule we have. It's called the 30-day rule. Now, what that means is the prospecting or the lead generation you do over the next 30 days will pay you over the next 90. And it's this rolling concept, kind of like cell phone minutes, where if you go do prospecting consistently for 90 days, that will then tee you up for 270 days of potential opportunities. And again, it continues to roll. So if you were in a place where you need opportunities right this second. Unfortunately, you're working a little bit with a step behind, if you will, from the finish line or the starting line of where you want to be. You need to be prospecting when you don't need it, because when you do need it, if you look up all of a sudden, you're like, crap, I need clients. That 30-day rule needs to take effect, and you need to earn the ability to create conversations, create leads, create clients by doing the opportunity lead generation, prospecting, whatever you want to call it, in advance. Okay, now there are strategies. We can talk about this on another call. The idea of quick wins or low-hanging fruit to sort of identify people within your current network you could go to, be referred to, or find clients through. That can happen for sure quicker than 30 days. But if you're doing outbound prospecting, you're going to strangers, or even just setting up ads and trying to figure out how to get that to work, there is a time curve, a little bit of a learning curve. And if you're not willing to put that in and get I call this the snowball effect, getting that snowball to build up momentum, roll down the hill and get bigger, you are setting yourself up for failure. So don't prospect just when you need it. Always be prospecting. Consider the 30-day rule. If the results aren't showing up right away, good. That's part of the process. You need to put in the work, earn it through optimizing your process. Go back to episode, I believe, 2 or 1. We talk a lot about the idea of how to track this, and I promise it's worthwhile. Listen. And last really piece of tangible advice I want to share with you around this concept is, as you are prospecting, as you're having conversations with people, you do not want to be coming from a place of scarcity where you need clients, because not only do they feel that, but you'll start to make decisions out of desperation and scarcity and take on bad clients. And here's the best example I have of that is you need, not really an example, but another saying. I want you to really take this to heart. And it could be mean, and some people might disagree with this, but I don't care. I'm going to say it anyways. And this builds on top of the Superman syndrome of not trying to save everyone. But you need to help winners win more. Don't try and save a loser from the hole that they're in. And maybe the word loser is not a nice politically correct way to say this, but if you have a client who's never sold a thing in their life and they come to you with a new business idea and they want your help marketing it, guess who's going to be blamed when they don't sell anything? It's you. It's you, even though very likely they had a crappy business model, they had a poor product market fit, but you are trying to take this business that is either a startup trying to figure it out, or frankly a loser with no product value or service value, and try to make it work. You're going to be frustrated because the client is going to expect the world from you and expect you to make that happen for them. And then you'll be spending extra time there to try and make that happen. It'll never ultimately work anyways, as it wasn't a good fit to begin with. You're even further in the hole, frustrated, one client down, and that is an opportunity cost of not only your mental well-being, but ability to go work with people who are actually doing well. So work with businesses who have already a proven model that they can sell through. Don't try and get someone from 0 to that first level. It's very, very difficult. All right? So I'm going to kick it over to Alex. This pretty much is the episode for today. A lot of valuable stuff we went through in here. Some esoteric, some more tangible, specific in the weeds, but all very important and critical for your journey as an agency owner or coach, or frankly, just any entrepreneur who needs to go through some of these lessons to learn them. And the last thing I will say is I'm going to repeat that. You need to go through some of these lessons to learn them. So that goes back to the idea of failing forward, being willing to be imperfect. Because we'll say these things and you'll nod your head and agree, but sometimes it will not click until you actually do it and learn it the hard way yourself. So don't be afraid of that. Embrace it. I'm going to kick it back over to Alex and we can wrap the show up.
Absolutely. We really hope that you enjoyed this. We never, underestimate how valuable your time is, and we super appreciate you giving us that time, whether you're listening live, whether you're on the podcast, whether you're watching the clip show, whether you are watching our full show on YouTube. Go to getmoreclientshow.com to find out more. You can also find us on YouTube as well and on all your favorite podcast apps. We're so grateful for you to listen to this. We cannot wait to bring you the show on a weekly basis. We hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and we will see you on the next one.